Hey everybody and welcome. Cindy Daychuk here with Queen Bee Creations. We are just about to embark on another milk paint project. If you were with me for the last one, you saw me do a big swivel mirrored dresser. And that was done kind of in one uniform color. We mixed some colors, but it was one uniform color. Turned out stunning. You can see a little piece of it over there. But as I continue to kind of explore the world of milk paint and take you guys with me, I wanted to do a little bit of blending on the piece with some wet paint, much like I do when I'm using my DIY clay paint. So what I have decided that I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a base coat of a blend between lemon drop and butter, which is kind of a creamy. I want kind of a soft, creamy yellow base. And then, once it's dry, I am going to then mix up two different paints, Moody Blue and Red Wagon, and we're going to apply that over top and hopefully get some chipping, hopefully get a little bit of the yellow peeking through, some of the wood peeking through. It's a bit of a, a fun kind of guessing game. We'll see what the milk paint wants to do, but that's the plan. So to get started, we need to mix up the milk paint. I am going to be using Sweet Pickins milk paint, which is all natural, food grade, no VOCs, perfect for me. When mixing milk paint, you've got kind of two ways to go. You can add paint to water or water to paint. I prefer to add the water to the paint because then I have better control over how thick it is and how much paint I end up with. I found in the past that if I do it the reverse, I've got the water and I start adding paint, I end up with way more milk paint than I need. And one of the beautiful things about milk paint is that I only have to mix up how much I need. And the powder is shelf stable. So I don't have containers of paint that start crusting over or go moldy or bad because I didn't use them fast enough. I only have to use as much as I need, make as much as I need. So we are going to be mixing up some lemon drop and some creamy butter to be able to create our base coat. I have the sample sizes, which is more than enough for one of these packets to do this whole piece of furniture. So it does go pretty far. And again, depending upon how thick or how thin you make it, there are different times that you would want to have different thicknesses of paint, so you could mix it up thicker if you really wanted to get a lot of kind of chipping and aging and all that fun goodness. So that's one of the beauties of milk paint is it's the only thing that is really going to ever give you that kind of chipping kind of look. So just off camera, sorry you didn't necessarily see, I was just taking a white spoon and scooping 2 scoops of each of the colors of butter and lemon drops. So, as much as I measure anything, it was kind of even. And I am going to be adding a little bit of, and I prefer warm water. I find that it mixes up better with warm water than with cold. And it could just be a me thing. Now, I'm not mixing this super thin, so not adding as much water as I might because it's my base coat, which means I want to add some extra bond. Sweet Pickins does not have the bonding agent built in. Some milk paints do. I like being able to add my own because the more bonding agent that's in it, the less likely it is to chip. So I get to be able to control that myself. So if I want it to chip, then I use little to no bonding agent. And on my base coat, I would prefer not to get a lot of chipping. Whoops, let me open my container. So I need to add it. But it means then then I need to add less water because I'm adding another liquid to that base coat. You can stir your milk paint up using preferably a wire whisk to be able to break up some of the chunks. Now again, I don't agonize over chunks if I have them in my mix because I'm going to be sanding my piece down and it's just going to sand those chunks away. But usually I take an immersion blender. So this is just for the shop. I don't take it back and forth to the house. And I got it at like a thrift store for $3. So you don't need to have a brand new one. Just check out the thrift stores to be able to get it. Now, when you're mixing it, I don't want to be pumping it up and down because I don't want to add a lot of bubbles to this. I just want it to mix and to blend fairly smooth. And that looks pretty good. So this has created kind of this lovely sort of soft ochre yellow, not like a light sunshine yellow. It's kind of a nice, nice kind of country yellow. So I'm really, really enjoying this color. I'm wondering if it's a little thinner than I would like. And my answer is yes. So I'm just going to add one more scoop of each of my colors and blend it again. So sometimes you just kind of play with it a little bit and see what's working for you and what isn't. And I think that, again, mixing this lemon drop with the butter is what created more of that deeper ochre, light ochre kind of color versus if I had mixed it with maybe a white like flour sack, which then I think it would have given a softer color. But because I'm going to be mixing it with this, the soft yellow would have not been as traditional, wouldn't have gone quite as well, I don't think. So just now I will say, I ordered a whack of these 32-ounce cups just for this very purpose, right? To be able to do the immersion blender and not have it splashing. Which was great, and I think was a brilliant idea, except I didn't realize that when you order them, it doesn't come with lids. Go figure. You have to order the lids separately. I still find that weird. So, okay, yeah. That's way, way better in terms of thickness. And really, I'm just looking to get this base coat on so that it creates that base look and gives me kind of, gives me some paint for my other layers to stick to. And I have enough that the way this is going on, I will probably do, you know what, see how much I've got? I will probably get 2 coats on this. I'll do a very thin coat to start just to get it to dry and to stick. And then I'll do a second thin coat on it and leave it to dry overnight. And then tomorrow I'll be able to come back in and start with some of the layering of the colors. So I'm just gonna carry on with this and I'll bring you back in tomorrow when this is all dried and we're ready to start blending our blues and our red together. I gotta tell you, so far, I am loving taking these old pieces and using a really old traditional product like the milk paint on it. It gives a look and a finish like no other. So if you haven't tried it before, I urge you to give it a try and see how it turns out for you, see how you like it. Let's see how this one turns out. We are ready for our next stage. And really we've got our lemon drop yellow kind of mixed with some of our buttermilk paint. So it's kind of this softened yellow look as our base coat. This has got the bond in it. We're now gonna mix up our milk paint in Red Wagon and Moody Blue. These are gonna be the two main colors on it. And I'm not gonna use any bonding agent on these. I want to get some of that chipping, and we'll see how that goes. So what I am envisioning is mixing up more of the blue, so it'll be more blue tone, and then using the red as kind of an accent color in some of the details and on the edging, and you'll kind of get an idea as we go. So to do this, I want to add some of the powder, and again, because I'm going to be doing this, I'm just debating making it all, actually. All right, so I'm gonna make all the Moody Blue, and then I'm gonna do half of the Red Wagon. And like I said before, I always like to add my water a bit at a time so that I kind of control how thin it is. Especially here, like I've only got the sample sizes of these in right now, although I have a big order coming in. So if I made this too runny, I don't have any more to add into it. So kind of go with what the thickness is. Plus, you can make it runny to use as a wash. You could make it thick to be able to add some texture and get a little bit more chipping. Really, you get to make your own call on this one. And I like using the warm water. So I'm mixing it with warm water, and I'm just kind of stirring it up a little bit here. Okay, and then before I contaminate my water, I want to save a little bit of this warm water to mix up my red, because I'm going to drop my spoons into the rest of that water jug, and because I'm going to use my immersion blender to be able to make this nice and smooth. And you'll notice I kind of swirled it sideways as opposed to pumping it up and down, which I use the pumping up and down method when I'm blending up my tomatoes for my tomato sauce or pureeing a soup. But here I want to minimize the number of bubbles. And so now I'm just rinsing this off in my water bucket, because I'm going to use it to mix up the red. I'm going to start with this drawer that I have. And let's get some of this paint on. Oh, and this color, Moody Blue, looks awesome with the yellow as well. And remember, we've got that yellow underneath, so we've already got a color there for it to chip down to. So we'll get some chipping down to the natural wood. Hopefully we get a little bit highlighting some of that yellow. Just extend this out here. And I have not, as I said earlier, I have not kind of blended milk paint colors together on the same piece before. I've layered milk paints, but I haven't looked at using them like I do the clay paint or anything like that. So this is kind of an experiment. You're along for the ride with me. In my head, it works fine. But I have lots of experiments that work fine in my head that don't work in reality. Let me just get that edging a little bit. Okay, great. I've just got a big chip brush that I'm going to use for some of the red, and I'm starting off, I don't have tons of paint on there. you can see that I'm kind of dragging it over so that I get a fair bit of coverage at the beginning, and then I get some of the streaking, and that's very much the look that I was hoping to get. So we'll see what some of that chipping leaves me with afterward. I'm digging that. So can you see the look where we're getting some of the red drifting across, but not solid, and we've got a lot of the blue showing through. Let me see if I can tip that a little bit. And a chip brush is perfect for this because it's got very uneven bristles. And then a little bit of dry brushing over the top. Okay, so in my head, that's perfect. Can you see that? That's exactly the look that I'm after. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna carry on and do the rest in exactly the same technique, layering the blue on and then drifting that red over the top. Even the blue has some of the yellow peeking through a little bit, so it's not perfect coverage. And then the red, we're really looking at wanting it to just kind of drift over and have definitely some of those brush marks showing. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, we are now at the sanding portion of the program. Now you could take an electric sander, you know, a little small handheld sander. I'm just reaching for my sanding box. To these if you'd like. I prefer doing it by hand. It's a little more work, I get it. But it's not a huge piece and it gives me a little bit more control. I find that sometimes, you know, if I'm using my little mouse sander, sometimes I just sand more than I needed to, and the sides and the details need me to do some hand sanding anyway. So I have two sanding blocks. They are identical. This one is worn, this one is not as worn. And then I also have some 180 grit for going in and doing a little bit more sanding. But really, I'm just taking my really worn ones, so it doesn't have much grit left to it. And I'm just starting out by knocking off all of the top edges. So it just kind of smooths out all of the paint, takes away any of the brush strokes that you can feel. And if I wanted, I could be done, right? So that's smoothed it out just lovely. If I like the look of that, then I could stop. And you remember that we had that pale yellow base, and it's coming through a little bit on some of the edging, a little bit of some of the spots in here. So I love that. So we're getting that little bit of that three-tone. I'm gonna take my slightly rougher block just around some of those edges. So here you can see it's bringing out a little bit of that yellow a little bit more. So I just want a little bit more of those rare spots and some of that yellow peeking through. And just kind of going back and forth and kind of softening some of that red out a little bit. And letting that yellow come through where it will. So I'm getting a little bit around that keyhole, which I like, so I want to bring that out a little bit more. Now, for some of those spot treatment areas where I want a little bit more showing, that's where I take the heavier grit. And I just do a little spot treatment here and there. So bringing a little bit more of that yellow out. And I think a little bit more around the edges. And maybe by the pulls. So that looks about right for me. So can you see those edges? You can see some of the pull areas. Softened it nicely. We're going to be using just some wax on this piece when we're ready to finish. So I'm not sure if I'm going to add a little bit of dark wax to it. I may. Once I get the wax on and I see how much it brings out some of the color, I may use a little bit of dark wax. We'll see on that. But I do have a surprise step. I'm going to be using another new product to the store on this one. So I'm going to carry on sanding all of this exactly as I did that drawer. So starting with a pretty smooth block, getting to a slightly rougher one once I've knocked it all down smooth to bring out some of the areas, do a little bit of spot treatment to bring out a bit more of the yellow, and then I'll bring you back in when we start doing some of the sealing and we'll make some decisions about whether or not we're dark waxing. And then we'll try the surprise. In my head, it's gonna work. And it should look super cool. But haven't done it before, so we'll see. We'll see together. Stay tuned. All right, I have my piece entirely sanded down. And I did end up trying my mouse sander just as an experiment, and it worked great. Now, the difference perhaps as well is that this piece did not have any discernible chipping. So I'm getting a lot of beautiful wear areas, but I'm not having any big flakes or chips. And if you'll recall, we did not put bond in with our last two. We only put the bond in with the yellow that went on first. So the next step for us is waxing, and I'm using DIY clear wax to start. And I do find that, especially with milk paint, this wax just goes so far. It just keeps on going. So don't feel like you have to over wax your piece. I hate putting on the wax and then having to wipe off tons. Because it just seems like such a waste, and maybe I'm cheap. But it just seems like too much work. So far, I only dipped in the once, and you can see it did that whole drawer. So that whole drawer has wax on it. So part of it is the awesomeness of DIY wax. But part of it also is the milk paint. Just allows the wax to go really far. So regardless of what wax you're using, don't feel like you have to over wax. And I think that sometimes people do, or they don't wipe the wax back afterward. And then when they allow it to harden and they go to buff, they're finding that it looks a little bit splotchy. So the time that you take in terms of applying the wax, it will spread it on evenly. And I just, you know what, there's no magic to it. I don't use a lot of wax, and I really mush it in. And I'm sure that's the technical term. So while this clear wax is on here and it's still wet, that's when I would apply any dark or black wax or anything that I would want, so that I can still move it around. I like to chop off a chip brush, so it's just little nubbies, and use that to apply my wax. Now, I'm using any Sloan dark wax. There is an awesome one with DIY as well. If you do not do a lot of furniture refinishing, buy a little one. I have had this one from Annie Sloan for 4 years right now. And I use it often. I use the black more than I use the dark, which is like a brown, but it's still going strong. So I've had no need to replace it, but I just use a tiny, tiny little bit on the corner, and then I rub it in where I need to. So I just like to apply it, if I'm going to apply it at all, in some of the worn areas. And I don't know if you can see kind of the little bit of a difference that it makes. So see how it's kind of darkened these areas. But what I don't want is to all of a sudden have this big splotch. So this corner here, I've got a little bit of a heavier application, but it still looks natural to the piece. What you don't want is all of this color and then whoop, this dark wax sitting there. So you do want to blend it in, and that's why I would always say just do a little tiny bit and rub that in to be able to darken, get a little bit of the wear happening. Let me flip this around. There we go. And add more after if you want, right? If you get too much on, you can take your clear wax to be able to act as a bit of eraser and bring it back. But it's always easiest to just do a little bit at a time and don't rush the process. And that's all that I would do on this. I would just do that little bit in those areas and just make it look a little bit richer, a little bit darker in some of those wear areas, and let it go at that. So again, I'm going to carry on with doing the waxing, and then wipe back if you need to. So wax your drawer, then wipe back if you need to. So if you've put a lot on, I'm really skimpy with the wax that I use, so I don't find that I have to wipe back a lot. And then let it set overnight, and then we'll come back in and we'll buff it. And I need to buff my whole piece before I do my surprise finish. So my little surprise embellishment is perhaps the right term. So I'll show you that when we come back next, because I will have this piece done and buffed. Okay, we have this all buffed, and really at this stage you could put your hardware on and call it a day. I, however, am going to do one last little thing to this, and that is I want to add some trim up along here. I have already added it, just a little touch to the sides. I'll show you that after. But the trim that I want to add is actually tin lace. Now, in my shop, I have it in two styles. This one, which is the Victorian, so you can see it's almost like a crown. But it is actually too wide for the top. So we are going to be doing it with this one, which is small enough to fit along that upper edge. All right, we can have it up here and just kind of hanging out there. So subtle, because it's not super bright. It's like in that tin kind of look. But I love the look. It's got kind of that old world look and old world feel. Now, you will need some tin snips, and you got to be a little bit careful because the edges where you cut are sharp. But what I will be doing, let me grab my tools over here, is taking that edge, that sharp edge, and just bending it backward and under so that I don't have any sharp edges just kind of hanging out. On the sides it wasn't a problem because I had two raised edges that I was fitting the tin in beside, although I turned the edges under anyway. But here I'm going to wrap it from the back, and I don't want it to catch on anybody. So you just kind of fold it under and then squeeze it flat with your pliers. And that way you have a nice smooth edge right here, and any of the sharp edges are going to be flat against your piece. And I had at first thought maybe I'll hot glue it onto the piece, because it's kind of got these raised indents, I wasn't sure that wood glue would work very well. So I was thinking I would hot glue it on, and then I thought, you know what? That would just make life miserable for somebody, you know, years from now that wanted to refinish this again, to have that glue on the wood. So what I decided, so I was gonna hot glue it and then nail it. And I decided, okay, let me just try nailing it first and see whether I can get it sitting flush enough that I don't have to do anything else. And I did. So we are just gonna be adding in small little nails. Like what I've got are these 18 gauge, just 5/8 of an inch. They're little tiny things that fit with the depth of the wood that I'm nailing into. So you don't need them to be any longer than is gonna hold it. And you certainly don't want it to be any longer than the width of the wood that you're doing. And here I'm looking at the back plate. So what I am looking at doing is wrapping this around from the back all the way across the front. I'm gonna take you in closer so you can see this as I'm doing it. But in essence then, I'll have that trim sitting up there just slightly under the lip so that again, that edge of the tin isn't gonna catch on anything, and have a little bit of that trim, just subtle, but I love it. I love that idea, and I've been dying for a project to be able to use this on. So again, it comes in the two styles, two sizes, but super cool, right? Okay, I'm excited this is working on this piece. I've been dying for something. Now, one thing that I will say is I am sort of taping this in place only so that when I'm nailing it, it's not bouncing all over the place on me. And because these are little tiny nails, and my fingers are fatter than the nail is, right? To try and hold it, I would be banging my fingers like crazy. You guys may be better at hammering than I am. So I'm holding it in little pliers against my piece. And as much as that is a pain in and of itself, it seems to work way better for me.